I've never liked the woods behind my grandfather's old house. Even as a kid, long before I knew what happened out there, I'd always walk a little faster when the trees started closing in. There was something about the way the air changed, the way the light bent differently between those crooked trunks. You could be 100 feet from the house and feel like you'd stepped into another place entirely. Somewhere older, somewhere colder, somewhere that never quite forgot. My name is Adam Caldwell. I'm 36 years old, and I'm not a writer, not a journalist. Just a guy who started pulling at a thread and didn't realize it was tied to something that never wanted to be found. I'm telling this story because I found something in the woods 17 years after two boys disappeared without a trace. And what I found, well, it shouldn't have still been there. It shouldn't have been intact. And it sure as hell shouldn't have been warm. But let me go back. The brothers were named Jacob and Miles Tanner. They were 7 and 9 years old when they vanished from their backyard in the fall of 1985. It was the kind of story that haunted a small town for decades. Two kids playing near the edge of the woods. A mother distracted for only a moment, and then, silence. No screams. No signs of struggle. No footprints leading deeper into the trees. Just the swing set still moving slightly when their mother came outside, and two plastic walkie-talkies lying in the grass. The town of Red Brook, Oregon, never recovered. The police searched for weeks, dogs, volunteers, helicopters. Nothing. Their father, Robert Tanner, died of a heart attack the following year. Their mother, Ellen, moved away and never returned. The case went cold, and it stayed cold. People whispered things about animal attacks, about child trafficking, even about some drifter spotted a few towns over. But there was never any real lead. No closure. I didn't know any of that when I first came to Red Brook. It was 2002. My grandfather had passed the previous winter, and I inherited his property, an old single-story cabin just outside the forest line, about 5 miles from where the Tanner boys had lived. I was 24 at the time, just out of a job, out of a relationship, and looking for an excuse to disappear for a while. The cabin was a wreck, dusty, cluttered, barely insulated, but it had power, a working stove, and something like peace. For the first few months, I didn't think much about the woods. I was focused on fixing the place up, chopping firewood, clearing the overgrown brush. But then I started finding things. It began small. A rusted Hot Wheels car in the leaves behind the tool shed. An old Tonka truck, half buried in the mud near the creek. At first, I figured they were leftovers from when I was a kid. I'd visited the cabin a few times in the early 90s, though I didn't remember leaving any toys behind. But these didn't look like anything I played with. They were older, heavier, made of metal and thick plastic. Worn, but not by time, by hands. Small hands. Then one day, while cutting through a thicket near the northern edge of the property, I found the walkie-talkie. It was wedged between two tree roots, covered in moss. But when I wiped it clean, I saw the label on the back. Miles, written in faded Sharpie. The plastic was scratched, the antenna bent, but the thing was intact. I took it back to the cabin, wiped it down, and left it on the counter. That night, it crackled. Just once. No voice. Just a burst of static. I thought maybe it had picked up a stray signal, though I hadn't put batteries in it. When I checked, the compartment was empty. I told myself it had to be a trick of memory, that maybe I'd put batteries in earlier and forgotten. But deep down, something about it felt wrong. Familiar. Like the voice of a dream you don't remember having. I started digging after that. Not just in the woods, but in the past. I went to the local library. Asked around town. The name Tanner was still a sore spot, even 17 years later. But eventually, I pieced it together. Enough to realize the boys had vanished not far from my grandfather's land. The sheriff at the time had dismissed the possibility they wandered this far. Too thick, he'd said. Too far. But I knew that wasn't true. Kids move fast. Especially when they think it's a game. Especially when they have a walkie-talkie and the idea that someone's out there, waiting to be found. I went back to the clearing the next day. Started mapping out the places I'd found the toys. They formed a line. A path. Leading deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone. So I followed it. It took me 3 hours to reach the final point. I had to crawl beneath brambles, cross a shallow stream, and scale a ridge that felt far too steep for kids that age. But at the top, in a shallow dip of earth surrounded by birch trees, I found them. 3 toys. A red fire truck, a plastic dinosaur, and a small blue cassette player. None of them were dirty. None were cracked. No vines had grown over them. They looked recent, like someone had just placed them there. The cassette player still had a tape inside. And when I pressed play, it worked. At first, I heard nothing, just the faint hiss of old tape winding through plastic, the low whir of spools turning. I thought maybe it had degraded, or maybe it was blank. But then, about 10 seconds in, a sound emerged. A voice. A child's voice. Crackling and soft, barely above a whisper. "Jacob, I'm hiding here. You can't find me." I froze. The hair on my arms lifted all at once. The tone wasn't playful. It was quiet, uncertain, like a boy trying to sound brave while sitting alone in the dark. There was a pause, and then another voice. Slightly older. Still a child. "I heard you, dummy. You're not good at hiding." The tape clicked. Then silence. Then a burst of static, like someone brushing against the microphone. Then a third voice. Not a child. It was deeper. Slower. Not quite a man's voice either, something in between. The tone was off. Too calm. Too measured. Like someone repeating a line they'd said 1,000 times. "You can't go home until you win." That's when I stopped the tape. I didn't rewind it. I didn't play it again. I just sat there, in the center of that small clearing, surrounded by toys that hadn't rusted or rotted in 17 years, with that phrase echoing in my head. "You can't go home until you win." I left everything where it was and backed out of the woods as fast as I could without sprinting. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself I'd hallucinated it, that the tape had just picked up stray sounds, or that it was a prank, or a leftover toy someone else had found and dropped. But none of that made sense. Not the voices, not the placement, not the condition, and not what happened next. 3 days later, I found footprints outside the cabin. Small ones. Barefoot. They led from the edge of the trees to the front steps, then stopped. The door was locked. Nothing was missing. But the cassette player, the one I brought back with me? It was gone. In its place, on the kitchen table, was a single toy soldier. Melted at the base. I packed up and left the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I crashed with a friend 2 states over. Didn't speak about it. Didn't look up the Tanners again. I tried to pretend it didn't happen. And for a while, it worked. But 13 months later, I got a call from the new owners of the cabin. They'd hired a crew to clear some of the older brush and put in a garden near the creek. While digging, they found something buried about 4 feet down. A rusted lunchbox. Inside were 2 more walkie-talkies, a set of Matchbox cars, and a photograph. The photo showed 2 boys standing in front of a birch tree. One in a striped shirt, the other in a denim jacket. They were holding up their hands in a peace sign, smiling, and behind them, half hidden in the trees, was a shape. Tall, blurry, wearing something like a coat. The photo was dated September 28, 1985, the day they disappeared. I asked the new owners to send me a scan of the photo. I didn't explain why. I didn't even tell them I'd lived there before. When the file arrived in my inbox, I opened it in the dark, holding my breath like I was standing on the edge of something that would pull me under the second I moved. It was just like they'd described. 2 boys, both smiling like they had no idea the next few minutes would be the last anyone would see of them. The birch trees behind them were identical to the ones in the clearing where I'd found the toys. But it was the figure in the background that made my mouth go dry. It wasn't in focus. In fact, it was barely visible at all. Just a smear of shape and shadow. But something about the way it stood didn't sit right. The angle of the arms. The length of the legs. The absence of a face. Not like it was obscured or turned. More like there was a void where the head should have been. And more than that, the figure was holding something. In its hand, a hand too large for the rest of its form, was a walkie-talkie. That detail changed everything. I reached out to Ellen Tanner, the boy's mother. It took me weeks to find her. She'd changed her last name, moved 3 states away, remarried, and lived completely off the radar. I was amazed she even answered my letter. But she did. She called me, and she spoke with the kind of voice that only comes from someone who's been afraid of silence for 20 years. "I saw him once," she said. I didn't have to ask who she meant. It was maybe a week after the boys disappeared. I was sitting in their room, holding their pillows, trying to catch a scent. I'd fallen asleep in the rocking chair. And when I woke up, the closet was open. There was someone standing inside it. Too tall to fit properly. Head bent forward like it had to fold to stay hidden. And it was holding a toy fire truck. Jacob's favorite. I asked her what she did. I blinked. And it was gone. She never told anyone. Not the police. Not her husband. They already thought I was losing it, she said. And maybe I was. But I know what I saw. I know what I saw. I asked if she recognized the toys I'd found. She said yes. Every one. But they were gone from the house weeks before the boys disappeared, she added. I thought they'd lost them in the woods. But now I wonder. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. That night, I pulled the map back out. The one I'd drawn based on where I'd found each item. I stared at the pattern again. The line. The path. And then I saw it. It wasn't a path. It was a circle. Each toy I'd found was positioned along a rough arc, all around the birch grove. And right in the center, dead center, was a narrow mound of earth I hadn't noticed before. It was so subtle it barely stood out. A slight rise, maybe 2 feet across. Covered in dead leaves. The next morning, I returned to the woods. I stood in the center of the circle. The air felt wrong. Still. Dense, like something waiting to exhale. I cleared the leaves with my boot. Underneath, the soil was black. Rich. Unnaturally soft. I dug with my hands until I hit something solid. A wooden box. It was child-sized. I hesitated. My chest was tight, my pulse crawling up my neck. But I lifted the lid. Inside was a tape recorder. The exact same model as the one I'd found a year earlier. Still clean. Still functional. On the cassette inside, written in red marker, last game. I took it home. I shouldn't have played it. But I did. The tape began with silence. Not hiss. Not static. Just silence. The kind that stretches too long, pressing on your ears until you start to hear your own blood moving. Then, softly, a voice. Jacob. He was breathing heavily, as if he'd been running. Okay, I'm hiding now. Don't peek. A pause. The crunch of leaves underfoot. Then Miles, calling from farther away. You're not in the fort, not under the log? Jacob? Another pause. Then Jacob's voice again, whispering now. I went the wrong way. Silence. I'm not where we're supposed to go. It's not the same trees anymore. Then came a sound I'll never forget for as long as I live. A deep, drawn-out creaking. Like an old door opening in the middle of the earth. And then a voice. One I'd heard once before on the other tape. That slow, even tone. Measured. You can't go home until you win. Miles shouted then, louder this time. But not scared. Not yet. I'm gonna find you. Then Jacob, closer to the recorder. Don't come here. Don't come to this part. He's watching. There was a sharp click, like the recorder being moved, and then the sound of feet scrambling through underbrush. Jacob was crying now. Breathing faster. He doesn't play right. He doesn't count. He just watches. A loud thud. Then static. Then Miles screaming, Jacob. I hear you. I'm coming. Silence. Then, after nearly a full minute of blank tape, Jacob's voice again. Calm. Too calm. I think I tagged him. Click. End of tape. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there in my living room, the old recorder still warm in my lap, as the daylight outside disappeared like someone turning a dimmer switch. I stayed up all night, just listening to the silence, waiting for something to knock. In the morning, I tried to go back to the grove. But I couldn't find it. The ridge was still there. The creek, the trees, but the path? Gone. The thicket I'd crawled through was solid now. The circle of birches didn't exist. It was as if the forest had rearranged itself overnight. I wandered for hours, finally gave up, went home. That night, I dreamed of the walkie-talkies. Of a crackling signal. A child's voice saying over and over, "Do you copy?" But the signal wasn't coming to me. It was coming from me. I woke to find a new cassette on the table. Not in a player. Just resting on the wood like someone had left it as a gift. No label. No markings. I haven't played it yet. Not because I'm afraid. Because I already know what it says. It says tag. And this time, it's my name on the tape. Not Jacob. Not Miles. Mine. I haven't told anyone about the last tape. It's still in the drawer beneath my bed, wrapped in the same napkin I found it in. Some nights I wake up reaching for it without knowing why. Hand trembling in the dark, heart pounding like I'm hearing a countdown that never starts. I've left it untouched for weeks now. But the sound follows me. I hear the faint clicks of a tape deck engaging even when nothing's playing. The low hiss of silence stretched too long. Once, while walking to the corner store, every car radio on the block cut out at the same moment. For exactly 9 seconds, then came back, one by one. I counted. 9 seconds. Same age as Miles. I told myself it was a coincidence. That the mind sees patterns where there are none. But then I started seeing toys. In places they didn't belong. A melted green army man on the hood of my car. A fire truck in the freezer at the grocery store. A worn-out action figure wedged under my pillow despite the fact I sleep alone in a locked apartment. All of them old, all of them familiar, and all of them warm, as if they'd just been played with minutes before. 2 weeks ago I returned to Redbrook. I didn't tell anyone. I just drove, parked near the edge of the woods, and sat for hours watching the treeline. Listening. And eventually, I heard it. A laugh. Faint. Childlike. Then another. Deeper. Slower. Not an echo. Not a memory. Something else. I stepped into the forest. I didn't bring supplies. No phone. No flashlight. Just the cassette. I followed the sound. And after what felt like hours I found the grove. Again. Just like before. Circle of birches. Ridge above. Same shallow depression in the center. Only now it wasn't empty. A tape recorder sat there. A different one. Larger. Newer. Plugged into nothing. Still running. A red light blinking. Recording. I reached for it, but before I could touch it, it stopped on its own. The tape popped out. Ejected. On the label written in smudged ink, "Do not tag back." I took it. Left the recorder. Walked home without remembering the walk. For days I haven't played it. But I know I will. I know because this morning there were small barefoot prints across my kitchen floor. Leading from the door to my nightstand. Where the new tape now sits. The old one, the one with my name, is gone. Replaced. Upgraded. Like the game is evolving. Adjusting. Preparing for the next round. I don't think it ever ends. I think each person who finds a tape becomes part of the circuit. Like an old switchboard of missing names and borrowed voices. And I think Jacob and Miles are still playing. Somewhere deeper than the woods. Somewhere older. Somewhere that remembers more than it lets on. Maybe I'll see them again. Maybe I already have. Maybe that's what the second voice is now. The one I sometimes hear layered beneath mine in recordings. The one that says ready or not before I do. I used to be afraid of silence. But now I understand it. Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the space where the game begins again. The breath before the voice. The blink before the clearing returns. So I'm writing this now not as a warning. Not even as a goodbye. Just as a marker. A toy left in the leaves. A walkie-talkie left in the grass. A sound left humming long after the tape ends. Because someone else will find this. You will. And when you do, you'll hear the voice. Feel the shift. Know the weight. And maybe you'll play too. Maybe you already have. Maybe this story was your tape. Maybe I was your clearing. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe this is the first knock. The first breath. The first creak. The first voice. And maybe you're it now. I thought I could live with it. I thought if I just stayed quiet, kept moving, stayed out of the woods, I'd be safe. But the game doesn't care where you go. It only cares if you're listening. Last week, I was in a small thrift shop in Idaho. Nowhere town. Just passing through. I wasn't looking for anything. But there it was. A cassette player. Same make. Same model. Dusty. Battery cover missing. A price tag stuck to the front, $2. And taped to it, crooked and yellowed with age, was a note. Not typed. Not printed. Written by hand. He's still hiding. I left the store. I didn't buy it. Didn't touch it. Didn't even look back. But that night, in my motel room, the same cassette player was on the dresser. Same scratches. Same missing battery cover. Same note. No one had been in the room. I opened the door. Stepped outside. All around the parking lot, lined up along the curb, were toys. Little ones. A plastic dinosaur. A bent action figure. A toy car with one missing wheel. And in the middle, sitting perfectly upright, was a melted walkie-talkie. Still warm. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I walked to the end of the lot, where the woods began again. Because they're always there now. Everywhere I go. Always some patch of trees. Always a clearing if I look hard enough. Always the sound of someone counting. And behind that voice, the same slow whisper. Your turn. I didn't run this time. I stepped forward into the trees. Not because I was brave, not because I wanted to, but because I knew there's no outrunning something that walks behind you. The forest was shallow, no more than a half acre behind the motel, but once I crossed the first row of trees, it felt different. Quiet, like it wasn't connected to the world outside. I walked slowly, trying not to make noise, but the leaves seemed louder than they should have been. Dry, brittle, like they'd been dead for years even though it was summer. The clearing was there, exactly like before, not the same one, but the same shape, the same circle of trees. A shallow dip in the center. Empty at first, then I blinked, and they were there. 2 figures, small, standing shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the clearing. One in a striped shirt. One in denim, holding walkie-talkies. They didn't move. I didn't speak. Then one of them raised a hand. Not to wave, to point, at me, and suddenly they were gone. Not walked away, not faded, just gone, like dust blown from a table. In their place, in the exact same spot, was a single cassette. Stuck upright in the dirt like a headstone. I didn't pick it up. I turned, walked out of the woods. This time the trees didn't shift behind me. They didn't close or rearrange. They let me go, almost like they knew I'd be back. The cassette was in my pocket when I got to the motel. I didn't put it there. And when I reached for my wallet, I found something else in the other pocket. A piece of torn paper. Faded blue, looked like it had come from a kid's notebook. On it, in messy pencil. You're getting closer. I haven't played the tape. But I know what's on it. Not words, not laughter. It's the sound of me. Looking. I kept the tape with me but didn't play it. I told myself I was done chasing answers, done following trails that only led in circles, but every time I tried to throw it away it came back. On the dashboard, in my backpack, once even tucked inside a gas station map I hadn't touched in days. It wanted to be heard. Not for a message, not for a warning, for recognition. Like something on the other side of the tape was waiting to hear me too. I started dreaming about places I'd never been. Birch trees growing through living room floors, children's voices echoing through subway tunnels, walkie-talkies buried in beach sand still whispering through the static, "Come find us." I wake up sweating, breathless, with the shape of the woods etched into the back of my eyes. I don't think the boys were the first. I don't even think they were the only ones. I think they were the last ones we noticed before the story got quieter, before it slipped out of the news and into the trees, before the forest stopped being a place and started being a memory that lives in the space between tape hiss and silence. And now it's back. Because I saw something yesterday. In a parking garage, 5 levels underground. A wall of concrete, no trees in sight. And there, on the far side, chalk lines. Drawn in a circle. 2 names in the center, Jacob. Miles. And next to them, a third line. Not a name. Just the word, next. When I blinked it was gone, but I know what I saw. I know what it means. I don't think I'm hunting anymore. I think I'm being led. Not toward an answer, but toward my place in the pattern. Because I've been carrying the tape too long. Because I've heard too much. Because the game doesn't end when you stop playing. It ends when you're part of it. I left the garage without looking back. That night, I checked the tape again. Same one, same label, blank, no date, no writing, but the reel inside, it had moved. Just a little, like something had been recorded. Or unspooled. I hadn't touched it, hadn't played it, but the magnetic strip had shifted. I held it to my ear. No sound, but I swear I could feel it. A low vibration, a hum beneath the plastic. Like it was breathing. That's when I remembered something I'd read once. About tape recorders picking up residual energy in haunted places. Not sound, not speech, just feeling, grief, memory, intention. What if that's what the tape is now? Not a recording, but a piece of the woods. A piece of them. The next day, I drove. No destination, just away. But the woods followed. Doesn't matter if I'm in the desert, or a city, or on a plane. The pattern returns. The birch trees. The laughter. The counting. 3 knocks on the hotel room wall. Always 3. Then silence. Then one long breath, like someone waiting on the other side of the tape. Yesterday, I woke up to find 2 more cassettes. Not on the table, not in my pockets, in my boots, one in each, same handwriting, closer, almost. I think I know what's coming. Not the end, the beginning, because the last thing I recorded, before all this started, was a voicemail. Back in 2002. Before I found the toys. Before I heard their names. It was a message to my grandfather. Hey, it's Adam. I'm almost there. Just passing through Redbrook now. Place looks different. More trees than I remember. I never got a call back. But I just checked that old inbox. There's a new voicemail. Timestamped last night. No number. Just silence. Then my voice. Hey, it's Adam. I'm almost there. Then 2 other voices. Faint. Children. Laughing. Then one final whisper. You found it. I dropped the phone. Not out of fear, out of certainty. Like my body already knew what was coming next and just disconnected. The sound didn't stop when the phone hit the floor. I could still hear it. As if the message had moved past the speaker. Into the room. Into me. I didn't sleep. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there, listening to my own breath and the subtle mechanical sound of tape spools spinning. But there was no tape playing. No recorder turned on. And yet, I could hear it. Not in the room, not in my ears, but just behind my thoughts. That rhythm, that familiar cadence, step, crunch, breath, whisper, repeat. It's not just sound anymore. It's structure, pattern, something built like a story but alive like a memory. The kind of thing that only needs to be told once before it starts telling you. I opened my backpack this morning and found the first cassette again. The one I left in Redbrook. The one with Jacob's voice. It still worked. I played it once more. But the voice had changed. Same words, different tone. It wasn't a boy this time. It was me, saying the same lines, the same warnings. Word for word, don't come to this part. He's watching. And I remembered something I'd buried deep. A dream I had months ago. A clearing, a tape recorder in the dirt. And 2 boys standing at the edge of the trees. But this time, I wasn't watching them. They were watching me, and one of them pointed. Tag, he said, and the other smiled. You're it now. That wasn't a dream. It was a memory. One I hadn't had yet. But I will. Because I'm not following the story anymore. I am the story now. I stayed in that motel for 3 more days. I didn't go outside. I barely ate. I sat in the corner with the blinds shut, listening for the sounds I knew would come eventually. The knocks, the creaks, the quiet laughter echoing down the hallway when no one was checked into the rooms next to mine. I started hearing the walkie-talkies again, not real ones, just the sound they made. That clicking pop when you press the button. The high-pitched whine of the channel searching. Once, in the middle of the second night, I heard a voice call out from beneath the bed. Adam, I can see you. It was Miles, not the way he sounded in the old tapes. Older, like someone who had been playing the same game for too long. Someone who'd learned to mimic better. To hide deeper. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stayed curled up in the corner until sunrise. That morning, I found a new cassette outside my door. No envelope. Just lying there on the welcome mat. Black shell. No label. But instead of the usual low hum, I heard something else. Birdsong. A specific type of bird I hadn't heard in years. The same kind that used to nest outside my grandfather's cabin when I was little. A sound I hadn't thought about since the early 90s. I sat there for 20 minutes, listening to that birdsong on a loop. And just before the tape clicked off, I heard someone speak, softly, almost kindly. You never left the woods. I packed my things, got in the car, and drove until I couldn't see trees anymore. Desert, rocks, dust, a place that felt like it couldn't support anything older than the highway itself. But the feeling stayed, the presence. Like the weight of the woods was in my lungs now, in my spine. I started seeing shapes in glass reflections that weren't mine. My voice changed on recordings. Just slightly. The pitch, the pauses. Like someone learning to wear my skin in audio. One night, I checked myself into a roadside clinic outside of Gallup, New Mexico. Told the nurse I was hearing voices. Seeing things. She asked if I was a danger to others. I told her, not yet. They ran tests. Held me for observation. After 2 days, they said I was fine. Healthy. Rested. But they kept the tape I'd been carrying. Said it was evidence in an open investigation. When I checked out, I found it waiting for me in the glove compartment of my car. A new label on it now. Hiding spot number 6. I didn't ask what happened to the others. I didn't need to. Because when I drove away from the clinic, my radio, which hadn't worked in weeks, crackled to life. No music, just static. Then, a whisper. Miles is still hiding, but he's tired. You should take a turn. I nearly crashed the car pulling off the road. I sat there for hours. No sound, no signal, just that tape on the seat beside me, warm like it had been in someone's hands. I wanted to throw it out the window. Break it, burn it, but I didn't, because I knew it would come back. They always do. That night, I dreamed of the original clearing. The birch trees, the ridge, the ring of toys around the center. But this time, it wasn't empty. There was a mirror. Old, tall, freestanding. Like something from a theater dressing room. Propped up against one of the trees. And in the mirror, I saw myself. Kneeling, holding a tape. And behind me, standing just outside the frame, 2 boys. Smiling. I turned around in the dream. No one there. Turned back to the mirror. Still smiling. Then one of them whispered, "You were the last one to find us. That means you're the last one that gets to leave." I woke up gasping, hand clutching something cold. The tape recorder. Still running, still recording, but there was no cassette inside. Just the sound of my breath. And another breath layered underneath. Not mine. I tried to convince myself it was a malfunction. That the recorder picked up some old sound, an echo, some artifact from the environment. But the breath wasn't a glitch. It responded to mine. When I inhaled, it paused. When I held my breath, it held too. And when I whispered hello into the empty mic, the breath on the tape replied. "Found you." I threw the recorder across the room. It cracked against the wall, batteries scattering. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for something, movement, more sound, anything. Nothing happened, but that night, I heard it again. Not in the tape, in the air, outside my window. A soft static buzz, like a signal searching for its pair. Followed by the softest whisper of fabric brushing against trees. Then a voice, low and patient. Come out, wherever you are." I didn't sleep. In the morning, I checked my phone. A new recording had appeared. I didn't open it. I just stared at the file name, rec_0006_ It hadn't been there the day before. I hadn't made it. I turned off my phone, pulled the battery, snapped the SIM card. I took the battery out of my car key fob. I unplugged the motel clock radio. But the recording was still there when I turned the phone back on. The file had changed names. Now it said, you_can't_hide_adam.mp3. I left that place without checking out. I didn't even take my bag. I drove for hours with no map, no destination, just the hum of tires and the knowledge that I wasn't running anymore. I was being herded. The forest isn't in Redbrook anymore. It's in me. Or maybe it always was. Maybe that's what no one understood. That it's not a place. It's a condition, a frequency, a kind of static that waits until the moment your life gets quiet enough to hear it. And then it begins. I started seeing the toys again. In places that made no sense. A red fire truck balanced on top of a highway sign. A walkie-talkie lodged in the crack of a canyon wall. A melted action figure inside the vending machine at a rest stop, behind the glass, in slot B4. I left them alone. I stopped touching them. I stopped answering the whispers. But the game doesn't need your permission. Last night, I walked past a playground just after dusk. It was empty, at first. Then I heard it. The counting. 1, 2, 3. Not loud, not close, but clear. I kept walking. Then at 10, something behind me said, "Ready or not?" I ran. When I got to the next town, my motel keycard didn't work. The clerk told me I'd never checked in. But when I returned to my car, the door was unlocked. On the driver's seat, a cassette. No label, no case, just a note, handwritten and taped to the back. Final round. I didn't start the car. I didn't even get in. I stood there in the empty parking lot, dusk turning into night, staring at the cassette as if it might open its eyes. The words "final round" looked freshly written, ink not yet fully dry, edges of the paper still curling like someone had taped it on just minutes before. I knew what it meant. This wasn't a message. It was an invitation. I picked it up, held it in my hand. The plastic was cold at first, then warm. Like a heartbeat, like holding a hand. I drove for hours. No direction, no GPS. Just followed whatever instinct pulled at the base of my spine. And without ever meaning to, without realizing until the road narrowed and the trees thickened. I was back. Redbrook. Not the same streets. Not the same signs. But the same feeling. That weight in the air. That sense of something waiting for me to stop pretending I wasn't already part of it. The town looked abandoned. Stores shuttered. No lights in the windows. Gas pumps rusted and leaning like bones. No people. Just shadows behind curtains I couldn't prove were really there. I drove past what used to be the Tanner house. It was gone. Burned down, maybe. Overgrown with ivy. The ground cracked like it hadn't seen water in years. But the backyard still had the swing set. It moved in the wind. Only, there was no wind. I parked the car near the edge of the forest. Same trees. Same density. That impossible stillness that doesn't exist anywhere else. You don't walk into those woods, you're let in. So I stepped through. This time, the path didn't fight me. The leaves didn't crunch. The brambles moved aside. The trees seemed to part, guiding me forward. As if they recognized me. As if they'd been waiting for this moment. The clearing was exactly as I remembered it. The circle of birch. The shallow center. The echo of laughter, like it had been stitched into the air itself. And in the center, on a blanket that hadn't been there before, sat the tape recorder. Already playing. I didn't see a speaker. But I heard it. My voice. I'm Adam. I found the toys. I found the tapes. I followed the path. I came back. Then silence. Then two other voices. Jacob. Miles. They spoke at the same time. You made it. You win. I waited. Then the third voice. The one I hadn't heard since the first tape. That slow, calm, measured tone. You're it now. I felt it before I saw it. Something behind me. Not approaching. Not even watching. Just present. Like a weight in the air. Like gravity itself had shifted. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I stepped forward. I sat down on the blanket. And I pressed record. Because that's what comes next, isn't it? Someone has to stay. Someone has to tell the story. Someone has to keep the game going. And maybe that's what I've always been doing. Recording, remembering, passing it on without knowing. You're hearing this now because the tape reached you. Or the story did. And if it did, then I need you to do one thing. Don't rewind. Don't erase. Just listen. Because the game isn't over. Not yet. And someone else needs to play. Maybe it's already you. Maybe you're already holding the next tape. So go ahead. Push play. I sat in that clearing until the sun came up. Or maybe it never really set. Time doesn't move right in that place. It bends, loops, folds into itself like a tape that's been played too many times. The kind of loop where the voices don't change, but you do. The recorder clicked off after a while. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The woods weren't asking me to run anymore. They weren't chasing. They were listening, like they had finally gotten what they wanted. A story. A voice. Someone who stayed long enough to understand this wasn't about finding Jacob or Miles anymore. It was about becoming part of what they became. Not gone. Not taken. Recorded. I've tried to leave since then. I've packed up. Walked back the way I came. Sometimes the path lets me through. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, I'm not sure whether I ever left at all. Because the motel rooms all look the same now. The roads never lead as far as they used to. And there's always a tape waiting on the table. Different handwriting, different casing, same message. Tag, you're it. I still carry the first tape. The one with their voices. It's worn down now. Edges cracked. Spools loose. But when I press play, it still works. Every time. And every time, it ends the same way. With a new voice. Not mine. Not theirs. Someone else. And I know what that means. The circle is still turning. The game is still being played. And I'm just the one holding the deck for a while. So I'm leaving this here. Not as a warning. Not as a plea. But as a marker. A page in the dirt. So when you find the clearing, because you will, you'll know what to do. Sit down. Press record. And listen. Because if the voice speaks your name. If the tape bears your memory. If the trees part for you like they did for me. It means the story is ready for its next player. And somewhere in the silence, two boys are still counting. 1, 2, 3. Ready or not, you know the rest.